Today is the one-year anniversary of the Hamas attack on Israel. That is something that Congressman Brad Schneider, who is a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, has put out a statement about. He's here now to talk about this one-year anniversary with us. Congressman Schneider, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. Good to talk with you.
You are also the co-founder and co-chair of the Abraham Accords Caucus. Tell me, I'm not familiar with that. What is that?
So the Abraham Accords, as you know, is the agreement between Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and then Morocco 4 years ago. Normalization of relations and really a pathway for peace that I think could be the framework for peace in the entire region. We formed a bipartisan, bicameral caucus, so both Democrats and Republicans, as well as House and Senate, to support the Abraham Accords. It's something that I believe is, like I said, the framework to build upon. And within that, after the horrific attack of last October 7th and the subsequent war, we created a Gaza working group so that Congress isn't going to solve the problem in the Middle East, but we play certainly a role in making sure that Israel has the resources to defend itself and protect its citizens, but also that we keep open that prospect for a better future for all the people of the region. We created a Gaza working group, and we have met over the last several months with the ambassadors from the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, Israel, and most recently the ambassador to the U.S. from Saudi Arabia.
And when you have those meetings, what do you talk about? I mean, do you talk about what's going on now? Do you talk about hostage negotiation? Do you talk about how to create a lasting peace? What are the things what are the items discussed?
All of the above. I think everybody wants to see this war come to an end in Gaza and in Lebanon. We know that as long as Hamas is entrenched in Gaza, firing rockets into Israel, holding 101 people hostage, as long as Hezbollah, which started firing rockets and missiles into Israel on October 8th, the day after Hamas's attack, continues to threaten Israel, and ultimately as long as Iran, who as recently as last Tuesday fired 180 ballistic missiles at Israel, as long as they refuse to accept the existence of a Jewish state, seek to destroy Israel and wipe out the Jewish people, there can't be peace. But as long as good people that are willing to work towards peace, and that's Israel and our allies and the United States playing a critical role, the U.S. helped create a peace treaty between Egypt and Israel more than 40 years ago, did the same with Jordan, helped facilitate the Abraham Accords, and we have a critical role. There's going to be a new future for the Middle East that breaks away from this history of violence. The U.S. has an important role to play, so we talk about all those things.
I was always a little bit skeptical when people were basically, at least some folks saying, like, somehow this was all Joe Biden's fault, that somehow if he were just tougher, if he took more action, that he could somehow force a ceasefire. And I was talking to a historian at the beginning of my show today who said that that basically somehow the U.S. has to be tougher, has to be more firm, that somehow this situation isn't going to resolve itself on its own unless we take more action. Do you agree with that? And do we have that much power? And is it being used correctly?
We don't have all power. Nobody does. If we did, if the United States could have envisioned and created peace, we would have done so a long time ago. And we can talk about putting pressure on Israel and persuading the Netanyahu government to make concessions. They made concessions. There was a deal on the table in February. There was a deal on the table in May. There was a deal on the table in March. And at the end of the day, Hamas never agreed to any of those. Sinwar, hidden in a bunker somewhere in Gaza, using hostages as human shields, doesn't seem inclined to agree to end his and Hamas's war against Israel. And it leaves Israel no choice but to continue to seek to defeat Hamas and rescue its hostages. Israel's not perfect. There's plenty of room for criticism, without question. But at the end of the day, until Iran and Iran's proxies are willing to abandon their hope of eliminating the Jewish state and wiping out the Jewish people, there's not going to be peace.
One of the focus of a lot of the memorial services, the peaceful protests that I've seen today, a main part of that are the remaining hostages and bringing them home. We just had that horrific hostage rescue attempt that went wrong with Hamas deciding that rather than allowing the 5 hostages to be rescued, they would instead execute them. Is there any hope that the remaining hostages, which some people say are really Hamas's only ace card here, that they will be returned alive?
We have to be hopeful. It's 367 days since 251 people were taken hostage into Gaza. More than 100 were released last November, 55 days approximately after being taken hostage. A small number, very few, have been rescued subsequently. And as you mentioned, it was actually 6 who died, including Hirsch Goldberg Poland, whose family, his parents are from the Chicago area. His grandmother and aunt still lives here, is a dear friend of mine. In fact, they'll be speaking tonight at a community event marking this day. We all wanted Hirsch to come home. We want, there's nothing more in the world that I want than the hostages to come home, this war to come to an end, and both the Israelis and the Palestinians able to live together in peace. That's what we all are praying for, if we are praying on the right side of history. And unfortunately, Hamas refuses to let that happen. And as long as Hamas can control Gaza and threaten Israel, the prospects of the hostages coming home is further away.
Yeah. What kind of power do other countries have? I know that Qatar was deeply involved in a lot of these talks. It doesn't seem that anybody has enough sway to really force some kind of a negotiation or a ceasefire here.
Yeah, I wish there was a way to bring the parties to the table for a negotiation. With Hamas, if there's going to be a deal for the release of the hostages, everyone should recognize that it's cutting a deal with an evil genocidal organization. And that's a hard ask to make of anybody. As long as I said before, as long as Hamas is going to rain terror over the people of Gaza, is going to threaten Israel with more rocket attacks and another October 7th, as they said themselves, they want to repeat October 7th again and again and again. It's hard to imagine any way to negotiate with them. The pressure, it has to be international pressure. Ultimately, I think that pressure has to be on Iran. Iran is the linchpin. They're the ones who fund Hamas, who fund Hezbollah, who fund the Houthis. They're the ones who drive the strategy. Their goal is a ring of fire around Israel and an axis of evil to defeat not just Israel, but the United States and the West.
Brad, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you're very busy, making appearances at organizations, and that this is something that is a very important cause. Congressman from the 10th District, Brad Schneider. Brad, thanks again.
If you have one more second, can
Sure.
I close with one thing? All right, so last night there was a ceremony in Highland Park marking the anniversary, lighting memorial candles for those who died. And they wrapped up by singing a Matisyahu song. I just want to quote some of the lyrics where he says, the song's One Day. And it's, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't want to fight no more. There'll be no more wars and our children will play. And that was a gathering of people who support Israel, were carrying Israeli flags, were praying for the return of the hostages, but also praying for peace. And I know there are people on all sides of this issue. If people on all sides can pray for peace, we can find a path to peace.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. Thank you very much, Congressman Brad Schneider.